Hey the rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a feature match between myself piloting Blue Black Solaria versus Paul and his take on Order Athenia. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our 2024 Quarter 1 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session. So as we get things set up here for the mulligan, just a reminder that Odyssey Games does have pre-orders up still for Pilgrim Memories. You can check that out in the link in the description. You are not going to want to miss this set. Spoilers keep coming out and it's just looking like an incredible pickup. Definitely going to want to give it a shot. So we have Solaria, Blue Black Solaria on the left versus Paul Reisman playing Order Athenia on the right. Right out the gate, we get to start with a Solaria's Wind because of Solaria's Homelands trigger here, which is very helpful, especially when playing against a potential combo deck like Order Athenia, to be able to say, hey, slow down, take your time. We don't want you to get too out of hand here. Going into our turn, we can't use this will coin for much of anything in this matchup, especially since we're probably about to get a station out, so it's better to just kind of burn the coin right away and throw in a Cascade. Now the reason why that's a face down card is because someone was borrowing my arc list and that had my Cascades in it, so that's why. And then we also hit another Cascade off the top, so that worked out. So Solar Station of Darkness coming in here because of Solaria's ability. We're going to go ahead and get a Water Solaris Sight, which gets another card RFG, and then we can use Solaria for Mastery to get Solaria's Water. So the way Solaria works is pretty much you want to try to get all of the Solarias out very quickly so that you're RFGing a lot of cards every single turn to start being able to play for the stations effectively and start recycling all those cards that you can just buy back over and over and over again because they get to be different colors. Paul is going ahead to use Mikage Shinjiro here to ship a bunch of cards to the graveyard, kind of set up the grave for something else there. We see a Darkness Moon fragment getting to 4C there. Probably not going to see much action this turn. We do see that he has a couple Kilo of Fossil Girls, so there is a world where perhaps we see some of these, Solarias get popped, but they're still going to generate some pretty decent value here. Using Solaria's Water to RFG the top card, buy back the Stein's Fragments because it counts as a water card thanks to Solaria, and then removing a card from my hand from the game, and then using Solaria's Wind probably to go ahead and just at the end of his turn make it so he can't play anything else. This is mainly to just get other cards RFG'd, and then putting that back still at the end of the turn, we're going to go ahead and flash in a Pluraltipitale Solarized Scepter, which is helpful here to be able to set up with the token generating, swinging in for lethal there, showing Paul what I tucked back for Solarization, recognizing that I was supposed to draw that card off of Pluraltipitale, and now we're going to draw into turn. So this is already a good indicator that Solaria gets complicated. So you're going to want to definitely get practice in before you play this ruler too much to the extent. I'm going to getting another ruler here. We get Solaris Station of Wind, Calling Stone with Station of Darkness. Hit a Rainbow Solaris Light, which is very helpful. We see Solaria's Light. Now there is a world here where we use one of the Solarias to buy back the other Solarias, but ultimately here we're just going to go for a Niklaus's Corollas, putting those 4 cards back. Technically, one thing to note here is that I should have also paid one with the Solaria's Water Solaris Sight, because you have to just pay the void cost with Solarization, so that is an error on my part. Ultimately, though, because we have Pluraltipitale out, we are currently threatening potential lethal next turn because we'll be able to make the token version of Niklaus and then swing in with the token. So just keep that in mind here. A little bit of a misplay there. I definitely should have used one more water, one more resource there. During his turn before recovery, we're going to go ahead and make it so that ordering costs more, so that if Paul does want to go into an Ordered Athenia or an Ordered Obrazuki, it's going to cost 2 will here. This is mainly to try to force Paul to have to call Stone. That is the kind of primary purpose of it. We want to make sure that we don't have to deal with Order Athenia as much as possible. We see a cast of Tree of Growth here. We could use the Cascade on it, but that's not really the concerning card. We're going to let Paul go ahead and draw a card. We do see the Tree of Death, Decay here, which makes us discard a card. Ultimately not particularly scary here, so we're just going to go ahead and discard that Stein's Fragments from earlier, and then we see a pass turn from Paul. Going into our turn, Now, this is one of the reasons why, again, this line here wouldn't have been necessary. Thankfully, it doesn't really play out in the main timing of like this match. But this is Excavation of a Legacy. It's a really powerful card for Solaria. Essentially, what it means is we name a card and we remove cards from our deck until we see that card, and then we get to buy it back. And we're playing a single copy of Electra's Training. So the main reason for this is because we can give our J-Rulers Swiftness, which is a huge part here. So we're going to see how far we go. It also kind of helps serve as ramp for Solaria, which is kind of nice. We finally see that Electra's Training. The rest of the cards go to the RFG. Now, keep in mind, again, I technically shouldn't be able to play this here because I didn't use the Water Solaria site for the tokens. In the grand scheme of things, as you'll see here in the sequencing, as I'll talk about it, it didn't really matter to be able to find the lethal this turn. We're going to go ahead and crack and use Plurta Batale's effect. This lets us reveal the Plurta Batale from the RF outside the game, get the token, which now means our tokens are flying thousands. So we're threatening lethal this turn, regardless of what happens with the Steins. Regardless of what happens with the additional work here. So we do go ahead and cast the Electra's Training to be able to give our J-Ruler Swiftness. This mainly is related to being able to judgment all these dragons really quickly, as well as being able to swing with the Niklaus. But we're pretty safe here. We're going to go ahead and swing in for 10. Now, again, in this situation, we see the Mikage-Raya come in here to try to mill something, and it's going to be able to serve as a blocker, which means that the Electra's Training kind of does matter, but also not really, because as soon as we have 5,000 damage represented just by the tokens. When Paul goes to block with the Raya, we can just bounce the Tree of Growth back to his hand with the token, and then the other 4 tokens can swing in for 4,000. At this point in time, because we let the block go through, he does gain the 400 life, and so we do technically need the Electra's Training to have resolved so that we can find our lethal here. It's just a sequencing error, and just one thing to keep in mind. Always make sure that you can only pay the void cost with Solarization, and be sure to actually tab properly. So the sequencing there didn't super matter. The Excavation and the Electra's Training didn't matter. We had the other cards, but just as a good note to learn as we go into game 2. So going into game 2 here, you can see Paul taking the coin as expected from an order deck. You can see just kind of some of how the explosiveness of Solaria with those token generators can very quickly turn the tide and just swing through for lethal. I mean, things like Niklaus being able to just have 5 flowers right out the gate. Those tokens are no joke. And so we'll hopefully see if Paul can kind of get a little bit more of the engine going this time around, or whether or not the order kind of constrictions of Solaria's water or Solaria's wind can continue to hold that combo deck kind of in check. Homeland ability at the beginning of the game, we're going to start with Solaria's Water, which is a great start for Solaria, being able to make it so that Paul doesn't have the ability to order coin on 1 unless he just does it right now at the end of our turn, which is potentially a very real line of just ordering something like Mikage-Raya. We do see a second Solaria's with Solaria's Fire off of Mastery, and then we're going to go ahead and tuck that card back to go ahead and cast the Cascade. Again, that counts as a water card, so for the sake of Cascade, because of Solaria, it works. Now, we are seeing the coin come down here to pitch a Mikage-Raya, but it's not being ordered, which I think is an interesting decision here. Being able to, you know, kind of get past the Solaria's Water. It's probably going to take a bit before ordering is going to be able to be consistent enough. So it's something to the effect of making the J-Ruler out there so that I can't like bounce with the token or something like that. Seems to me like it would probably be the option. Although I do only have 2 cards in hand here, so there's a very real opportunity for the idea of like, let's rip my hand to shreds. Before we get too much further, we see the Tree of Decay coming down for free. We get to swing in for 4 and get some life gain here. And then we're just going to probably just pass the turn. Representing that it is a Cascade here, we're going to go ahead and just try to remove the top 2 cards of the deck at the end of the turn. Say, prevent all non-combat damage, and ordering costs 1 more. And then we're also just going to use Solaris Sight to RFG the top card of my deck from the game as well. Just really trying to say like, hey, I'm going to just use these alternate resources as best as possible. And while I might not be drawing a bunch of cards, I am at least going to get things moving. Calling a stone here, we hit a Rainbow Solaris Sight. which gets us an Excavation of the Legacy, which is a little bit rough to see off the top, getting RFG'd, but ultimately we don't even have the will to cast it right now, or the stones that would allow us to cast it right now. So we're actually going to tuck all 4 of those cards back using our Rainbow Solar Sight properly this time and get that Niklaus's Corollas. These tokens are very, very helpful. They keep ourselves very safe, especially since that Rhea is no longer ordered, and if we can get to a Puerto Vitale, they just represent 5,000 damage. They're also very hard for the opponent to deal with, simply because of the fact that they do not count as resonators right now, so a lot of spot removal just isn't going to hit them, and you get to really control the board in a really effective way. Swinging in for 4, getting that life gain. Every single one of these swings from this Mikage Rhea does make those Niklaus's Corollas not able to do nearly as much. We're going to go ahead and reduce the void cost of something and be able to cast this. Again, we can pay 1 blue less for Cascade because we technically don't control linear resonators, so we can use the Darkness Solara Sight to pay for the white and be able to cast another Cascade, buffering our turn further and getting another card RFG'd. We're going to go ahead and use Solaria's Water to buy back the Cascade, and also we forget to discard a card here, which is a little bit of an error. So again, reminder that Solaria is complicated. Remember how every single thing works here. So you RFG the top card, then you get to buy back something, and then you have to discard something. That's how these Solarias work, and we forgot to do that here. Using Solaria's Fire, we're going to go ahead and try to target the Solaria's Wind. This time I believe we do things correctly. This is chaseable. Keep in mind. So we RFG the top. Oh, we do get to buy back the wind. No response. Still forgetting to discard a card there, which is my fault. Again, you always have to discard a card with Solaria's. We do see a Solaria's Wind, but Paul punishes us here by saying, look, you have a graveyard RFG. You want to use it? Let's go ahead and get rid of it with Athenia's Essence, which is good. That's a good line. Keeping my RFG empty while my hand is low also means it's very difficult for me to be able to establish value, and it's a good point to be able to keep himself in a good position. So swings in. We're going to go ahead and flash in another Cascade just for the sake of it, seeing if maybe we see something, but ultimately not getting anything to be able to keep ourselves safe and just taking that 4 damage. Now, we could be putting this Rhea back in his hand with the tokens, but why? There's no point in doing that right now. It doesn't help us at all. It lets Paul set up for other future turns by things like sending the things that he wants to buy back with Castle of Beatrice or anything else like that. So we're trying to set up our kind of taxes here just to RFG things. We're going to try to, again, buy back Solaria's Darkness. This time we do remember to discard a card, I think, because we get to buy back Solaria's Darkness. Again, remember, you're always going net neutral with Solaria's. Nope, just forgot. Net neutral with Solaria's. When you buy something back, you have to also RFG something from your hand. So that's just me not playing the cards properly. Paul saying, though, hey, before you get to take any more actions, now that you've tapped all your Solarias, let's go ahead and RFG your graveyard again, and does a really good job of just making it so that it's going to be expensive for me to start playing cards, and it's also very difficult for me to judgment. We do see Solaria's Darkness come down here, so I have all of them except the light. The light is in the graveyard now. Would have been nice to be able to buy that back, but we do get to start calling some more stones, getting some more resources, and we're going to be RFGing a lot of cards every single turn. And then from there, though, we're just going to have to continue to take this beating. So we've got a lot of additions, currently sitting on 12 additions. Kilua coming down here at the end of my turn to try to pop the Solaria's Wind. We don't super mind losing the Solaria's Wind because we could just use the other Solarias to well, no, they have to get RFG'd, so never mind. So we're actually going to go ahead and attempt to use the Solaria's Wind that's taxing, just to say, like, hey, that's your card for the turn, at least on my turn. And then we're going to use one of the tokens to put the Solaria's Wind back in my hand. This is so that next turn we can recast it, because, again, anything that you can do to slow down the combo deck is very, very helpful, and Solaria's Wind and Solaria's Water combined do that a lot. Solaria's Darkness could actually be a reason to start going ahead and not taking this damage from this Rhea anymore, simply because we could make it so that the search from the Rhea doesn't resolve. But the thing about the search is that it can be chased, so we could always just see it be responded to. Casting, Athenia enters the Game of Gods. As a reminder, this is also Paul playing a card wrong. We didn't catch it in the moment. Athenia enters the Game of Gods doesn't RFG as cost. It RFGs as part of Resolution, so actually wouldn't even be able to get those 3 cards RFG because of the Castle of Beatrice. Thankfully, we just use the Cascade and make him put it on the bottom of a deck anyway, so it's not going to resolve. And we just let that happen. So using this Cascade, it gets RFG'd at the end of the turn. We're going to go ahead and flash in or discard the Plurtipotale Chronogear to get our token back that we used, and then start RFGing a bunch of cards. We're going to try to buy back the Chronogear. This is so if we find it into a Plurtipotale, RFG the top, buy it back. This time remembering to discard a card properly, discarding a last movement. We saw the Plurtipotale there, so we're at a position where we might just reincarnate this turn, which would be pretty effective. Could flash in the Plurtipotale, draw a card, but ultimately choosing that we want to just RFG a bunch of stuff anyway, maybe trying to get for a Solarization. We could put that last movement back in our hand, or back on the bottom to Solarize Plurtipotale, and that would set us up for being able to reincarnate this turn anyway as well. Ultimately, though, we're choosing to go for the Solaria's Wind, waiting one more turn maybe to just kind of flash in and see what we can hit here, getting another Stein's Fragments. Choosing not to Solarize, the Plurtipotale comes down here. And now next turn, we're setting up for the world where we're going to reincarnate at upkeep and then be able to have all of those tokens ready to go. It's not going to be enough to do lethal because we've gained so much life for Paul, but it is going to be a good position to be able to start putting some serious pressure in, especially if we can find something like the way to get Electra's Training or something like that. This Mikage Ray on Paul's side putting in some serious work, gaining a lot of life, mainly just because I don't want to allow him to continue to recycle it. But still wondering exactly what we're going to establish here. An Ordered Athenia or an Ordered Oborozuki would probably be the best position here because I couldn't bounce it back. We're going to go ahead and attempt to draw for turn with the number of cards that we have in our graveyard, seeing if we want to buy anything back. Now we're going to try to go for the Plurtipotale. We see a response of setting the stage of Providence. So we're doing this bit before recovery, so our Cascades don't help us here, and this now means that the Cascades are not going to be able to do anything for us for the rest of the turn. We are going to go ahead and say, okay, if that's what you're doing, we're going to go ahead and set up the tax. You've cast your spell, so now the next card is going to be more expensive. You only have so much will to work with, and we want to try to be a little bit aggressive here. So we get to reveal the Chronogear, which comes out as the Stein copy of Niklaus, but then because we have the Plurtipotale Chronogear in our hand, we get to reincarnate on top of it. So now we have this big old beast of a card. Now, in this matchup in particular, this would be pretty helpful to use the tap ability to name Oborozuki Vampire Astrologian. You see we have all 5 of the stations at this point. The Vampire Astrologian here would only be devastating to us if it gets to be ordered. So if we can use Plurtipotale during Paul's turn, call Oborozuki, then there's no way for Paul to cast it, which means that we can then get another free turn of just being able to swing, and at that point in time, it's probably the end of the game. But we're swinging in with these tokens, uses Justice's Recon Drone to be able to look, blocks with the Rhea, blocks with the Recon Drone, and then we'll go ahead and swing in for 3,000 damage here with the tokens, because Plurtipotale won't be able to swing this turn. We do see an attempted buyback, and then goes to recast, but I'm like, I don't think you have the will to be able to do that because you're taxed under Solaria's Wind. You can buy back, you just won't be able to recast it. Because we've cast 2 spells this turn, so now Mikage Rhea costs an additional 2. Just kind of explaining exactly how that taxing is going to work here, because again, playing against Solaria's Wind is a little bit difficult, especially if you're not used to it. So can buy back, but wouldn't be able to recast anything because of the extra will that was needed to play the Recon Drone. Takes Paul down to 3,000. And then again, this is one of the moments where, for me, it would make the most sense. We can throw down Stein's Fragments here, which would just also help to just lock in a ton of damage, and then doing the Oberazuki, putting a bunch of cards back here, trying to decide exactly what we're going to do, using Solaria's Darkness, attempting to buy back the Chrono Gear here, RFGing the top, and then we are going to get rid of the Reincarnation Chrono Gear, probably, because we just really need one turn for lethal, so going for the Reincarnated is probably not necessary, as opposed to just generating a million tokens. So we'll see. Because there's also a world where, hilariously enough, if we keep the Stein's Fragments and the Chrono Gear generator, and the Life Zapper Chrono Gear, we can, hilariously enough, swing with the tokens, and then like keep bouncing the token generating Chrono Gear back to our hand, and then recasting it with Solarization to just make more tokens, and just life loss there. Technically, we could probably do it this turn to do enough. We'd have to get a total of 15 tokens though, so we'd have to do it at least 5 times. Because each time we do it, it's 2 tokens. So it would be close, but it would certainly be doable to kind of sequence your way through here and find the lethal. We're setting up the Stein's Fragments here, completely blanking on trying to use Plurta Vitale to lock out from Vampire Astrologian, which is a mistake, because it would honestly just truly lock out the game, because at this point in time, the board is so wide that there's really not much Paul could do except for land an Oberazuki, which Paul just happens to have exactly that in his hand. So we get Oberazuki out here. We've only got 1 card in hand. It's going to get a bunch of +1/+1 counters here. Not a ton, because the deck has, I haven't made him get rid of a ton of cards, and he hasn't sequenced a ton of things here, but it's still going to get more than enough to be able to wipe the board off the map, especially be considering the tokens are 1000s and Plurta Vitale is a 12/12, so the tokens will die before Plurta Vitale, which means that he'll also get rid of all my additions, which is hilarious that that's the sequence there. That because they're not addition, or they're resonators and additions right now, they're actually more vulnerable than if I had just left them as just the additions. So, has plenty of counters here. Gets to play a free Tree of Growth. One thing to keep in mind is at this point in time, he should not have any more than 1 card in the RFG, which doesn't really matter. He's got 8 tokens, which is enough to apply a neg-16 to the board. So that's not really the concern. Plenty of card advantages here, trying to decide to get rid of that 1 card. We can use Roar of Dark Blessing here to help get more cards RFG'd. We're going to respond using, attempt to use Life Zapper Solarized Statue in response to the discard to generate a couple extra tokens. Paul says that is fine. I'm not going to respond. We do get to draw a card, so we're going to lose that card anyway. We accept that that card's getting discarded. No big deal. And then Paul is going to start doing the stat neg for the board. There's a world where it might behoove Paul to wait until my turn to set up the stat neg, just to have more control over my ability to reestablish. But ultimately, we're just going to try to clear the board now, which I think also makes a lot of sense. So we are choosing to apply a neg-4 to the board. Before that resolves, we're going to try to see if we can get some cheeky value out of this play line. Or at the very least, make Paul burn more counters now versus later. So attempting to use the addition token to bounce the solarized statue back to my hand. Lets that resolve. We then can do Solarization, because that card is a Darkness card, thanks to Solaria, to recast the Solarized Statue, draw another card, and generate a couple extra counters. Seeing if we can get Paul to kind of let that happen. Ultimately, Paul says, no, those tokens are going to come in and immediately die, which we say, that's fine. Take 1,400 in life loss from the tokens that I already have. And then, we'll generate 2 extra, we'll draw a card, generate 2 tokens that immediately die, and keep the Life Zapper. Again, there's a world where we should just continue to keep the Life Zapper in our hand to maybe try to replenish our hand here. There's something to be said about, I know the tokens are going to immediately die, but use them to keep bouncing Life Zapper back to your hand. And then you know, get some value out of it that way. We're going to go ahead and bounce the Tree of Decay back to his hand. It's something that he has to be able to recast. Then we lose all of the tokens. And burning through 6 of the counters of the 8 lets him destroy the Chrono Gear and sets us up with, once again, just a field clear filled with just additions. Now, if that Tree of Decay wants to come back down, we're at advantage here because we have access to the Cascades. So the Cascades will be able to just say no, back to the bottom of the deck. I don't want to discard a card, which is exactly what we want. Paul is going to be able to gain some more +1/+1 counters, though, thanks to that Tree of Growth. Although, technically, it would be too many. Just something to keep in mind. Does decide to move them all back. Going to gain a little bit of life. Go up to 28. Thanks to Tree of Life, get a couple more counters on there to be able to set up a stat neg or a big swing in the following turn. Losing the Tree of Decay also is really helpful here because even, you know, we want to just set things up for some lethal lines, for having to worry about any potential additional, like, life loss from Tree of Decay. So what we're doing here is actually very interesting. We cast the Excavation and then hold priority to do Solaria's Wind, which is unchaseable, thus making it so that if Paul wants to try to respond, because he's already cast 2 things this turn, his next action is going to have to cost 2. So the idea being, like, we're trying to pseudo protect the Excavation. Unfortunately, though, did not see Electra's Training being very deep. That is the roughest part here. We wanted to obviously hit a lot more cards off of that Electra's Training so that we had the opportunity to try to survive. Paul is going to be able to also apply a nice stat neg this turn to the board, so we're certainly not going to go in with the dragons this turn, but there is a very high likelihood that we are going to, sequencing properly in terms of remembering what to discard, very high likelihood that we are probably just going to flip Light Dragon just to get that Oborozuki off the board and kind of reset things for ourselves. Also, RFGing another card here. We're going to buy back the Stein's Fragments. RFG the top card. See another Excavation of the Legacy. I know we bought the Plur de Petale token generator back, but we're also probably just immediately ditching it to Stein's Fragments because we're trying to finish the game off that way a little bit more. We see Paul with a Mikage Rhea, getting to pitch something he wants to buy back to the graveyard, or just setting Death Scythe. Death Scythe being able to set up things very nicely for that little combo. Move to recovery. No Tree of Decay, though, helps us nicely again, so we don't just get immediately wiped. Paul's going to apply a stat neg, just kind of asking what the stat line is on the dragons here, just so he knows exactly how much of a stat neg to apply. He knows what the 2 cards in my hand are. We've got Electra's Training, and we've got Stein's Fragments. Doing the proper thing of using the activations one at a time. Again, if you have the ability to do the effect multiple times in a row with something like stat neg, you should always put 1 on the chase, let it resolve, put 1 on the chase, let it resolve. It's just the better way to make sure that you minimize outplay from your opponent. So acknowledging the fact that we're going to, anything we flip this turn is just absolutely going to get destroyed. We're probably going to go ahead and call Stone with a Solaris Station, just in case we draw into Solaria's Light. Ultimately, no. We're going to go ahead and call Station with Solaria herself. Didn't see the Light Solaris Station. We're going to go ahead and just put 5 back here to Judgment Light Dragon so that we can clear the board. That is the whole point here. We just want to know that it's immediately going to die. That's fine. We just want it to die. So we're going to try to flip here. You see Paul has access to Killua Fossil Girl in the city, so attempt to perform Judgment. Throw this J-Ruler into the field. You know, we're not even casting Electra's Training right now. We try to goes to cancel it with Killua. We have the Cascade to be able to stop it. We do get to destroy the board, gets the Oborozuki, the Rhea, and the tree off of the board, which is really nice. acknowledging that we are not going to be able to flip anything else this turn because of the stat dang, but we probably are going to go ahead and cast the Electrous Training here just to set us up for the next turn and maybe draw us into something a little bit better. Putting 2 back, Electrous Training, setting up for the next turn lethal. We're going to give J Rulers We Control Swiftness until the end of the game. We send it to the graveyard there, which is incorrect. Paul catches this in a second. It actually goes to the RFG as it resolves, which ironically is also just again better for Solaria because you want to be able to solarize it, and we have Fire Station, so we can tuck Electro's Training back at the bottom of the deck. You can see how the deck gets a little bit insane in terms of its ability to just never deck out and resource itself a lot. This Solarized Gears Water does die immediately, don't get me wrong, we get that here. We're mainly just using it to, again, see if we can get some more cards in the RFG to set up for a really nice swing next turn. We also have all of those Solaria's stones, Solarites that are just going to RFG a bunch of cards out of the top of our deck here as well to set up for a bunch of judgments during next turn. The idea of just chuck a bunch of dragons at them. So Solaria's Water before recovery here just to make it so judgment costs 1 more. And then we're seeing what Paul has. Paul does not have very many cards in hand here. Has the ability to buy some stuff back, but it does cost resources at this point in time. And he knows that he's staring down a potential load of dragons next turn. So if we can't find access to... There is something to be said about like buying back the Oborozuki. And then... one of the Oborozukis that's in graveyard, and then trying to set up another stat egg. I don't know if there is a second Oborozuki in graveyard, though. We see a Tree of Decay get cast for free. At that point in time, we're going to go ahead and tax him, and then we discard a card, so now everything costs an additional 1 on top of... So, like, Mikage Shinjiro, to order something, would cost you 1 additional to be able to play the card, and then also 1 additional to be able to get through the Solaria's Wind. So double taxed, which is pretty great. So buying back with... the maybe just has Mikage Shinjiro in hand, paying the additional here, making the discounted off of Mikage Shinjiro's own abilities. We do get to see a Shinjiro come down, but I don't really know what that does here. Unfortunately, it's going to get popped very quickly by the flips. Not very much follow-up here. There's a setting the Stage of Providence. There's a way to make me discard cards, but at this point in time, it's not cards in hand that are being the concern. It's the dragons. Those are going to be the biggest detriments to Paul here. Now, we can set it up so that, one, we try to buy this card back, arching a card, and then seeing exactly what we have RFG'd here, we can go ahead and get the token. Let's crack to sack to get the token because we have 6 darkness cards in the RFG thanks to and we're going to immediately just go ahead and reincarnate onto Life Zapper here. We're going to RFG the next huge chunk of cards from my deck with the Solarites, and then move to recovery. Now, keep in mind, we've given our J-Rulers Swiftness, so Life Zapper is able to swing this turn, which is one of the reasons why we also like Solaria's Electrous Training in this deck, because you do get a lot of J-Rulers, and so you can just start throwing them at your opponent the same turn, especially when you do the reincarnation stuff off of the token generators. Swinging in for 12. This lets me buy back a Darkness Resonator from my graveyard, which lets me get another copy of Life Zapper back, which is nice. Swing in for 12. We have Mikage trading in with Life Zapper. Now, Life Zapper does also have Drain and Bane, so I also gain some life back. So you'll see kind of the life totals reset here, because again, if you reincarnate on top of something, you get the name and abilities of those things. So we go from 36 and 43. Now comes a lot of judgment. We're going to make it so that judgment costs 1 more for us. So mainly just, again, we want to make it so that Orbering is impossible for Paul at this point, because he only has 1 will available, and even though Athenia is up. Now we get to start tucking things back into my deck. We're doing a little bit of sorting here to find out what cards have omni-color versus what cards have specific colors, so that we know exactly what we're throwing back and when to judgment when. Keep in mind, because of the Solaris sites, we will be able to not only pay for the judgments of things, but we will also be able to RFG more cards to be able to make sure that we can get into more judgments this turn. So starting off with Dragon. Dragon comes in, burns the board for 2,000. Doesn't really do anything there, but it does get to swing in for 1,400. Takes Paul down to 29. Tuck a bunch more back here, specifically cards that include specifically water. To get those out of the way, get our Water Dragon here, having to pay for that. Dragon comes down. I'm going to put that Tree of Decay back in his hand, swing in for 13 with with Water Dragon. Put another 5 cards back. We can Judgment the Dragon of Wind here. Has Swiftness. Can take Paul down to get a bunch of elf tokens. Take Paul down to 3. Now, ultimately, we do also have the Chrono Gear in hand, so we could just pitch the Chrono Gear and make 2 tokens, and then banish them both to make Paul lose all that life. Paul is down to 12 at this point, or down to 4 at this point. But we're going to be a little bit cheekier. We're going to try to see if we can hit to Judgment the Darkness Dragon. We're just going to make stuff more expensive, make it so neither of us can search our deck. Still don't have access. Now we're going to prevent all damage until end of turn. We see we have 3 cards. We need 2 more of a certain color to be able to Judgment Solaris Station of Darkness. We're going to go ahead and RFG the top card with a Solarisite. Looking at what we have in the graveyard. Seeing what the likelihoods are of hitting more cards to RFG. We know we've been tucking stuff back. We know that there are cards that are specifically not going to be able to be Darkness, but I also have to be able to pay for the water tax on myself, because again, the Solarias are both sides taxing. So we're going to go ahead and RFG the top card of our deck with Solarisite. Again, at any point in time, we could just go ahead and toss the token. RFGing the top card. RFGing the top card. See another Gears, so we can then pay 5, pay the 1, flip the Dragon, Darkness Dragon, and then swing in for lethal that way. So just to kind of show you, sometimes you just have to throw a bunch of dragons at them. Hope you guys liked this match. Be sure to tune in later this week for the deck profiles for both lists. And until next time, this is GMO73 saying class dismissed.